And then the most important part of this kick, or in general of any kick, is clipping. And as I mentioned, our kicks are blocks.
Most of my tutorials or videos that come from similar channels try to answer the question of how successful artists produce hard techno. Sometimes these answers are correct, sometimes we just take guesses, not to mention that there is always more than a single way to get good results. To show you an approach and perspective different than mine, I invited to my channel LS41, a German hard techno duo that worked with Toxic Machinery and released their tracks on numerous labels, including the Innergate, where you can find their probably most popular track of all time. And today, me and Sam are going to take a peek inside of the project of their Freedom Inside Your Illness remix. Massive shout out for that opportunity. If you want to support the LS41 duo in one way or another, you can catch them on Instagram. They will be more than happy to work with smaller artists too, so don't hesitate to ask them for one-on-one session or mixing and mastering service if you wish to. Now let Sam do the talking while he shows us his Freedom Inside Your Illness remix project and shares with you his best tips for hard techno kick sound design.
I'll just start from the beginning again.
Yes, we've turned off all the processing so we can start out from the sample.
We turned off all the processing, so basically what our kicks go through is multiple processing chains. So as you can see here, we have two different kicks, buses going into a main kick bus. And so we have processing on here, we have processing on here on the groups, then we have multiple other layers as you can see, and there's just effects on basically everything, and that's basically how we make our kicks. It's just a lot of processing and a lot of EQing and a lot of hard clipping at a lot of stages. So at multiple stages, we find it better if you clip multiple times, you have a better result than just only hard clipping at the end. So that's basically our approach. And the main sound of this kick is basically this. So this is without any processing. The delay isn't doing anything, as you can see. It's just for a transition effect. The thing we do a lot with our kicks is parallel processing using a convolution reverb. So a convolution reverb, I don't know if I have to explain it or if you will explain that.
It works in the same way as the hybrid reverb from Ableton. So
exactly.
I don't think it
exactly.
Doesn't
it's
need much
basically
of an explanation.
Okay. So this is a convolution reverb. This is basically our favorite convolution reverb. It's just we use it all the time and we get the results we want. What we do is, as you can see, we have what is very important about this kick is that it's stereo. It's very stereo. That's what we do with our lot of our kicks. We try to we always keep the bass in mono, but we make everything else pretty much very stereo, and that's how you get those big sounding kicks because they're not mono. So you hear them everywhere basically. But you also have to make sure that it works on a mono system, but it does, so yay. So without anything except for the convolution reverb, it sounds like this. You can't really hear much of it, but this all plays a big role at the end because there's a lot of effects and a lot of hard clipping that goes on, that the smaller elements get pushed up and get louder, and that's how, like, even though this doesn't sound as big, it will get pushed up at the later stages. So what we do afterwards.
So to recap everything what we have heard so far, it starts off with a kick sample to which you add a short reverb. I can maybe, based on what I can hear, it is no longer than 2 seconds long. It's just
exactly.
Reverb that is later through multiple stages of, let's say, combined equalization and distortion, for example. This reverb is transformed into that white texture that gives you the white kick sound.
Exactly.
And the reason for why the ozone imager works well is that we have a reverb that precedes it. Because if the sample you tried to use the ozone imager on didn't have any reverb that gives the stereo width, then using the ozone imager wouldn't make much sense.
Yeah, basically. I mean, you could still try to use it, but it just wouldn't have the same effect as before. You could also use the option of widening your reverb itself with most, I think all reverbs have this, or like most reverbs, standard reverbs have this, is a stereo option. So you can either make it mono or like maximum stereo, but there you don't really have like a lot of control about which frequencies you want to be just to be more in the stereo field, and that's why we mostly always use ozone imager for this, because we want to keep the bass in mono, we want to keep the uh lower mid range between 100 and 600 more in mono, and then everything else that is like lower highs and complete and like top highs is we make them very stereo. So as you can see, if we just look at it, there's red dots here signaling, that that I think the polar sample is off. It still works.
I think it indicates that the volume is going past 0 decibels.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm not 100%. I think I thought it has to do with the polarity of it, but anyways, it doesn't really matter because it sounds good anyway.
Yes.
That is basically our main approach. If it sounds good, it sounds good. If someone told you to do something, like like we come from bass music, and they're like saying putting reverb on the sub bass is a no-no, absolute no-no. But then we came to techno, and then everyone puts reverb on their bass. It's just there are rules, but it's music production, and you can do whatever you want as long as it sounds good. You can basically do whatever you want. So
Makes sense.
yes, what we do a lot is EQ. So we EQ like at every stage. We EQ before we make the sound go into anything. Like here, we cut some of the highs because we have highs from the other layers, so we don't need any of those highs, like upper highs here from 7K onwards in that main kick. And let's see. There's another ozone imager here just to be sure that any of the low end is actually mono. It's just a precaution. Yeah, you don't have to do it, but we do it. But basically what really makes the sound, we have another layer here, which is just, you can barely hear it. It's a kick 2 layer, which is basically our go-to for our synths, our kicks. We make basically everything with kick 2. We have some sort of kick 2 layer in there, and this is just like a punch layer. I'm not gonna go through over it too much. There's nothing going on here. We have some distortion happening with Rift. Nice, I need to activate it. So Rift is another great plugin by Minimal Audio. It's like it's a distortion unit, but you can modulate it with a lot of parameters, and it does amazing things.
Yeah, similarly to Trash 2, it's a wave-shaped distortion.
Exactly. It's just a different approach. And we use Trash 2, which is also, I think you had in one of your questions, why we would prefer clipping over a hard shape, like a wave shaper like Trash 2, or saturator like Distortion, and the answer is we don't. We use everything.
Yes, I was actually about to write down that question.
Yes.
Is there any certain difference or benefit from using Clipper that you feel instead of, for example, using, I don't know, maybe Ableton Saturator with a another soft clip or hard clip mode, or yes, some other distortion effect?
To soft clipping, I would not recommend for like making kicks, because what soft clipping does, it like rounds it off, and hard clipping literally like cuts a sound flat, and that's basically what we want. That's why I don't use the saturator from Ableton, because it only has a soft clipper option.
Okay, but if you mention flattening the picks by using a new fangled clipper, do you do that out of consideration for the sound for the distortion itself, or you are thinking about the dynamic range, for example?
Oh, I just feel like the sound of the hard clipper is better. And yeah, the dynamic range, you're gonna see that we have no dynamic range in our kicks. It's full on a square.
Okay.
There is definitely like some dynamics happening, but yeah, that's kind of what we want is to be the kick as full as possible. Like that's what I'm saying. Like we're gonna show stuff that is kind of unorthodox, you know. So our kicks are clipped to the max. You'll see that in a second. So basically, we have these two layers and then going on together. And as you can see, these are also going through another send and return, which is, you know, for it sends your audio through the effect, and then your main signal, your main audio signal isn't being altered. So it's another hybrid reverb. It's another like convolution reverb, and as you can see, it's being processed a lot again. We can listen to it without. It's just making it louder. It's just making it louder. It's not really clipping anything.
Okay.
Okay, so we have that going through the send and return. That is also like a big thing about our kicks is we use a lot of send and returns in our kicks, especially with a hybrid reverb or a convolution, like just any type of convolution reverb will do. That's basically how we make our kicks. Also, we don't believe in rumble kicks. That was also one of your questions, how we do our rumbles. We don't. I don't know. We've never had a satisfying result of like putting a reverb on a kick and then low passing it and it sounded good. We just process everything together and that creates a result. We don't like do the typical you have a kick and then you have the rumble under it. It just since we do use a lot of kick two, where we get our main sub from, we don't really tend to use a rumble because we make the reverb without bass and have the sub clean. That's why we don't really make rumble kicks in the traditional sense. We
So
just
most
yeah,
of the times when you create the low end for your kick drums, the let's say sub bass sound, it comes from that kick 2 plugin. It doesn't come from the
exactly,
reverb. But
exactly.
do you also say that you don't distort that sub sound coming from the kick 2?
Um, it depends. Sometimes we do. Like we know that distortion takes away sub frequencies. And it depends. Like if we do a lot of processing, we will have a separate sub that is not being overly processed. But sometimes it still works. Like sometimes we throw like a couple trash twos on there and distort it with it, and then you have an end result that sounds better because the subs are being distorted with everything else, and that at the end creates an amazing sound. It's just like when you distort white noise and a sub together, like a lot, it makes an amazing sound with still a lot of sub. You know, it depends on the kick basically.
Okay.
Um, but mostly we do have a clean sub. Just yeah, not in this example. Since we do create rumbles like with the reverbs I showed you, but those are like all without mostly lows. So we sometimes we do lows, but yeah, that's rarely the case. We high pass our reverbs mostly. So but what is really important about all of our kicks basically is the processing we have on there. So I'm gonna turn these on after each other. So what we really love is Trash 2.
Okay,
It's
but
basic
just to clarify, now when you have the kick drop to channel with
yes,
that processing chain on the bottom, yes, again, what sounds two are there in that group? You have the main kick sound that is the kick drum with that
exactly.
convolution reverb, and the MIDI channel
Exactly.
is the kick drum from the kick 2 is this that,
Exactly.
let's say, tiny kick you use for a transient.
Exactly.
Okay,
Can you hear this?
yes,
Yes. That is basically just the distorted transient. Again, you can't hear it much, but it's because, you know, there isn't a lot of processing on there yet, and that is basically what we do with a lot of our sounds. We don't overly push them here in the mixer, but we try to bring everything together in a with a some sort of wave shaping or clipping. What we really like about Able Trash 2 is like the wave shaping without like any other like form of distortion or anything on there. That you can just basically do whatever you want with your sound. So this is with it. That's basically where you get the distorted sound.
Yes.
Then we throw an amp on there. Because to be honest, this is like a big tip I have. If your kick sounds muddy or whatever, just or like I don't know, stale without like much punch and highs and that kind of stuff, just use an amp. Not on full because that's just gonna destroy your sound, but just a decent amount and play around with these knobs here as well, like with the bass range, the middle frequencies and the high frequencies. Here we didn't because sometimes it also just sounds nice like that. Um, then, as I've said, we do a lot of EQing. So, because we do have a second layer, we needed some room. That's why, this sounds kind of muffled, but together with the second layer, which is called kick one, which is parts of the kick from the first drop. Yeah, it that's why we needed to make some space here.
Exactly.
Exactly. And what we also do a lot is we multi-band compress a lot of our kicks. And here we compressed some of the lows and the lower mids.
Does the
Um,
multiband compression on your kick drums most of the times look like that you try to compress only the low ends? So
oh no, mostly we compress the high ends, to be completely honest. But here, it felt like the sound was a bit like jumping up and down too much, and that's why we compress, because you want to control the volume of that frequency. So especially between I don't know, what is this, like I would say like 60 hertz and 250 hertz. It was just yeah, it just didn't sound right. And then yeah, we compressed that part, but mostly we compress the highs. So around this part, not too much, just a bit, and that just can create an amazing result.
yes, if you
Um,
use lots of hard clipping combined with amp and trash too, that definitely
exactly.
makes sense because it's very easy to
Exactly.
add so many high frequencies.
Exactly. Then there's more EQing. It's just basically we go a lot with the flow, and sometimes like we listen to a kick, and then we're like, oh, okay, it still needs a bit of EQing, and then we do something else. It needs some more EQing. So this is not like we don't have like a certain way of doing a kick every time. Like I don't have a preset to make my kicks. I literally make the kicks that Lucas and I make are basically processed from scratch, or either synthesized from scratch and processed from scratch, or processed from scratch. But mostly it's synthesized and processed from scratch. It's just like we've been doing it for so long that it's just kind of like we have these automatic like movements to the plugins we want. So that's why we don't really have a preset. We just know which plugins we need and we want.
Okay, and
Um,
by synthesized you mean using the Kick 2 plugin.
Exactly. Kick 2, or we also have analog gear. We also make our kicks with our module called Basilimus Iteritas Alia. It's a very weird name, but it's a lovely plugin. It's a lovely analog kick synthesizer. Also percussion synthesis and just I don't know, weird analog noises. But yeah, we make a lot of our like kicks from our analog gear, and then we throw it into Ableton, and then basically do the same way of processing as we're doing right now. Lots of
Okay.
processing, lots and lots of processing. And what is also very important about this kick is that we wanted it to be very in your face. Also, the transient, as you can see, this is a punctuate, also by Newfangled Audio. Basically, everything by Newfangled Audio is amazing. We can definitely recommend. Um, so basically, it's a transient shaper, and let's hear it with. And without. Yeah, so it changes the sound a lot, and we just does a lot of transient shaping. Like I said, this might just look off, but the end result is still that it sounds good.
It
And
sounds
what
like
is very
something you could achieve with a multiband compression too, but
yeah.
at least the transient shaper looks easier to use.
Yeah, yeah, it does. We also kind of increased the transient length to 34 milliseconds just to have a bit of a longer transient. And then the most important part of this kick, or in general of any kick, is clipping. And as I mentioned, our kicks are blocks. As you can see, like how much is being cut off. This might look weird and look off and whatever, but yeah, it might look weird, it might look off, but it works at the end of the day, and that's like the most important part. Um, Also, what is very important to keep in mind is to have a some sort of visual analyzer on your. If you have a second screen, then have it on your second screen because, no system that your sound system or monitoring system or headphones that you're going to have is going to represent the frequency range as you can hear it. So it's always very important, especially for mixing lows in your kicks, to have something like span or
Vision for X
yeah,
plugin.
exactly, Vision 4X or whatever. Just using anything to see the frequency representation of your kick.
Okay,
Um,
but if I have that Fox and Ghost band opened on another monitor and I look at the frequency or spectrum of the whole kick drum, what can I gain from looking at this frequency spectrum? Why do
what
you insist on having this, for example, opened all the time on a separate screen? How do you use that visual aid to help you create better kick sounds?
I want to know if my kick has enough lows, because for me, lows is always kind of hard to really 100% get right without like the proper, without like a, I don't know, like a proper monitoring system, or even if I had a 100% monitoring system that I would be comfortable with, I would still always use a visual analyzer to just see the levels of my different frequencies to see if what I look for is that my lows and my kicks are the highest in volume, and everything else is a bit under it. So the highs can be a bit higher as well, but at the end of the day, that the lows are basically the loudest thing in my kick.
Yeah, that's most of the time the case.
Exactly. Some producers do it differently. Like you have industrial hardcore producers that have barely any low end, and it still works. But my advice is also don't overdo it with your low end because if you're gonna play in a club, the club mostly has big systems and it's gonna sound good anyways. You can play literally a normal 909 kick sample through a club speaker and it's gonna sound amazing because club speakers are just big. So be careful not to overdo it with your lows because it might sound good on your system at home, like, oh yeah, the sub bass is amazing on this one, but in a club, it's just going to sound super boomy and very bad because the lows take up so much space in your kick that you can't hear anything else in a kick, and you do not want boomy kicks in a club because they sound bad. That's why I would advise you to use a visual analyzer because you can never know, is my sub loud enough or not? Well, you can, but you need to have the right system for that, and most people don't. That's
Okay,
why we use it.
and using
And
that visual frequency analyzer works in pair with reference tracks, yes, when you are working with
exactly.
music.
Exactly. I mean, you can also check like if you really like a certain song, just throw it into Ableton and then look at where like the sub I wouldn't look at where the sub peaks because, every master is a bit different. So I wouldn't really look at like the volume or yeah, it depends on the visual analyzer you're using. I would just look at the balance between your low end, between the low end in the track and all the other frequencies in the track. If you have the kick by itself, then great. Then try to analyze that part of the track. But if not, just try to analyze the frequency range of the track that you really like and try to replicate that in your track. And yeah, that's how I used to do it, and it worked. After we've literally clipped the life out of this kick, we did some more EQing because some part, especially like some of the highs got lost and some of the very like everything above like 10K kind of got lost, and some of the range around 1K got lost, and again around 60 hertz it got lost through the clipping. We decided to EQ those parts a bit as well. Normally I would put a clipper at the end of this as well again. Like, don't be shy to clip multiple times. But we clipped at the end of like on our main bus, we clipped. So yeah, it works. I could have clipped it as well afterwards, but I we decided not to. Like sometimes we also forget, but we always know that at the end, if we have multiple kick layers, there's gonna be a main layer that clips again. So we have nothing that goes over and nothing that kind of, I don't know, plays on its own without going through the main clipper. That's basically our way of achieving a coherent kick. Like, because sometimes you listen to kicks and they don't really seem like they're coming off from like the same source, and that's where like clipping plays a big role. It makes everything it makes everything glued and make it sound like it's one and not like different parts. And yeah, we layered it with this also. It's basically the kick from the first drop, just without the lows, without the low part. And this one is also processed a bit, also the saturator with a soft sine. Again, mid-side EQing, more EQing. Like, that's basically what we do. Is like I've said, we EQ a lot, but you always have to be careful. Here you use a multiband compressor again, but we don't compress here. We use it kind of like, not like an OTT, but we expand the frequencies around 2K and around 20K. Yeah, what I wanted to say is that you have to EQ, but don't overdo it, because sometimes, you can over EQ. It's just that, we've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and it's just our ears are getting like kind of our ears know what we want to listen to, and that's why it's kind of natural to EQ. This is also a very important part about music production. It's like a lot of experience, and so don't be frustrated at the beginning if you don't. I don't know. It just doesn't sound the way as big producers do, because their ears are trained and they can hear which frequencies sound good and which sound bad, and it's just you have like the sense of which frequency need boosting and which don't. And also a big tip from my side is sometimes just try to boost some frequencies. Just try it out. Just go through a kick, or like whatever group you have, and just take a equalizer. You can take any equalizer you want, but we just like to use FabFilter Pro Q3 because it's the GOAT. And just kind of like go like this and just go through your kick. And sometimes you can just find stuff that works, and sometimes it will sound like absolute garbage. But it's just, music is about happy little accidents, and that's what we try to do. And that's why we sometimes also try to EQ stuff that normally doesn't really work. But since we have a clipper always at the end of our main buses, it's never gonna go completely over zero and just be really bad. It's gonna be clipped with everything else, and then sometimes you can just get very, very nice results from that. Okay. So together they sound like, let's see, I turn that off. Without the second layer. And with the second layer. So as you can hear, it like just gives the sound that transient punchy part that really sticks out. Together with the transient of this, it just combines very nicely. And then again, like I've said at the end, we have another clipper, which clips both, which just clips both main kick groups. And again, as you can see, it's clipping like because we did a lot of transient shaping. There's the transient is really loud, and that's basically where the clipper comes in. It just hard clips everything at 0 dB. So basically, it's like brick wall limiting. It just cuts everything exactly at 0 dB, and that's why we like hard clipping because yeah, that's what hard clipping does.
Okay.
Um,
Doesn't that clipper at the very end
yeah.
cancel out a bit what you did earlier
Yeah, yeah,
with a transient
100%.
shaper?
100%. But like I've said, that's why sometimes stuff just works. Like here, like in this example, this is extreme transient shaping. Like it just doesn't sound good on its own, but because we use a hard clipper, it tones down those frequencies that it did before, that sounded awful before, and just makes them sound good. This is what I mean also again by we do things that just on an objective point of view, someone would say, yeah, but that doesn't make any sense because you're just clipping, like your clipper takes it away again. But yeah, it's just our way of producing and it works. And to be honest, it just, if we didn't transient shape it as much, the end result would be different. And that's why we do it.
Yeah, it sounds like something you learned just from experience. So when you are
Exactly.
designing a gig, you can immediately use definitely too much of a transient shaper because you know that you are used to use
Exactly.
a clipper at the very end, so it evens
Exactly.
out in a way you would like to.
Exactly. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And making kicks, that's basically what hard techno and is all about. I and Lucas sometimes sit there for like a 12 hours straight just making one kick. Like sometimes it takes a lot of time to make a good kick. Sometimes it takes an hour, sometimes it takes a couple of days. But it's it's the kick that mostly the track is all about, and that's why we spend so much time on it. And what we also do a lot that we haven't done here because we know we still wanted it to sound a bit cleaner, we do use trash 2 a lot. So on multiple layers as well. So it's like also the trash 2 has a built-in limiter. So it's basically we just limit and clip everything a lot. And that's why our sounds sound so full. It's just a lot of clipping and wave shaping.
You have mentioned that you are using a synthesized sound that gives you the sub bass sound.
Mm-hmm.
Do I remember right?
Exactly. Just not in this project. That's
Yes,
why
I
this
was just about to ask because I didn't see such a sound in this particular
no,
project.
it's
So
basically
if
yeah. Sorry.
if the lowest frequencies don't come from the sub bass sound you usually create in your projects,
Mm-hmm.
then from where do low frequencies come from in this project? Because you have
It's
the main kick
yeah,
that is
it's
passed
from that
through a
sample.
reverb.
It's from that sample. It's let's see. It's basically in the sample itself, and I was already happy with the low end it had itself. That's why it just worked, and it also worked after even pushing it through an amp, pushing it pushing it through our trash 2, so wave shaping it, also pushing it through the amp and everything else, and it still worked and it was still present, and that's why I felt like there was no need
Ah,
for a
yes.
separate sublayer. That's yeah, exactly. Like that's it's just we don't have like a this is what we're gonna do every time with a kick. We basically that's also why it's sometimes kind of like it's just sometimes draining to make music because we don't really use like templates and stuff like that. I mean, it could be our own fault. Like, I mean, we could do that, but I'm just so used to not having templates and just doing everything over and over and over again because that way it's just I don't know. I always have the possibility of happy little accidents, and that basically is the main way of improving your overall sound design is just trying out things even if it sounds wrong, just tweak knobs in a random any plugin or in anything you use, just tweak all the knobs, and sometimes stuff sounds good. And that's why I kind of don't like to use templates, especially on kicks and stuff. Yeah. I mean, I could randomize those templates, but yeah, it's worked the past 10 years, so
I also
I would
think that using no templates simply gives you more fun.
exactly. It just, I don't know, like the second I use a template, it's just, I don't know. I'm not bored, but it just doesn't create the same hype in me as making everything again from scratch. And I mean, we do have the same processing idea behind behind our kicks. Those go through, like, they are the same, but it's just not in the same order and stuff like that.
Okay.
And that's also a tip I can give is sometimes just just putting the amp in front of the trash, or putting putting the amp like right before the or like after the transient shaping, just that, because of the hard clipping, that completely changes the sound of your kick, because it goes into the hard clipper differently. And that's, yeah, also a way of experimenting. Just try putting distortion or any other plugin at a different part of your processing chain. Of course, your peaks are going to change, so you might want to look out for that. But at the end of the day, if it sounds good at the end, who cares? Like, who cares if you EQ'd some of the parts of your kick according to a processing choice you made before, but then you put the amp somewhere else, and then the EQing you've done is kind of redundant, but it can work again if it works, it works. You know what I'm saying? That's
Yes, happy
basically
little accidents.
happy little accidents. That's basically what my main thing is I got from bass music production, is happy little accidents, because there you do like a lot of like sound design, um, with a lot of like automation and different automating different parameters and just doing it randomly in that way. Yeah, just funny stuff happens. And producing should be is a lot of fun. And yeah, go have fun.
Okay, coming back to that low end of your kick drum once
Yes.
again, I remember that the main kick you have played without any processing at all back
Yes.
when you had all the effects turned off. This kick drum sample was relatively short, but I can understand that because of so many clipping and
Exactly.
distortion and equalization,
Exactly.
you, let's say, stretched the kick long enough to give you the
Yep.
low end for the whole beat.
Exactly. So I can play it again. I mean, that sample already has like a lot of lows, and with all the processing we've done, it's just kind of stretched it out. Like like you said, this also happens with the newfangled audio punctuate. We increased the transient length of it as well. And yeah, hard clipping is basically why it sounds so full in comparison to the beginning.
I have another question related to the transient shaper you have brought up a second ago. Do you
Mm-hmm.
feel like it helps you use less kick samples for layering? Because the way you used transient shaper in this project was to give the kick drum a high frequency transient that made the kick drum very clicky. Other producer could try to layer on top of such a kick drum another kick that is high passed, and then maybe he would try to glue that sound with maybe another distortion or a multiband compression effect. Does using a transient shaper instead of that process I mentioned a while ago seems to you in some way better, or it is just easier?
It depends, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a big fan of using transient shapers. I don't know, transient shapers can create weird clicks and stuff. That's why I tend to avoid using them. But here in this project, it worked. Um, a way to avoid those clicks and stuff is to immediately resample your kick after like throwing a transient shaper on there, or else it just transient shapers can do weird things. So I would advise to use more layers. Then a transient shaper, but in this example, it just works.
So you use it only at the right times.
Exactly. But I do use it on groups and stuff, especially like on like hi-hats, where I find they have too much sustain. Then I use the DS drum shaper. This one is a absolute I, absolute recommendation. Um, you can use this. It doesn't really matter which preset you use. You can use kicks, also, the kick option also for other perk sounds. But I advise using this one. It just has a very nice sound. Yeah, that's the one I use a lot, but never really on kicks.
I have a last question regarding this particular kick drum. Uh, People are often confused on using during equalization in the variant a high pass filter that has a cutoff frequency set to around 30 Hz. So the theory behind this equalization is to cut away all the frequencies that we are not supposed to hear anyways. And based on that theory, removing these lowest, almost unhearable frequencies should clear the low end and make the bass of the kick hit even better or harder. And if I was looking at your project good enough, then I couldn't see such a high pass filter in your kick drum. So what is your opinion on that? Because maybe that's something you just don't do always, and again you rather focus on how does it sound like, yes, and if the kick, you think the kick sounds good, then you, for example, don't use such a high pass filter.
Yes, this is a topic that is very much disputed. There's people that say removing low end in general, like everything under 20 hertz gives you headroom, gives you more headroom or that kind of stuff. I don't want it to sound too opinionated, but I don't think that's it barely gives you any more headroom. Like you can look at videos. Like I used to cut the lows under 20 hertz, but I wasn't really thinking about it because why would you determine those frequencies under there are unnecessary? Like if you listen to good music on a good festival sound system, then those frequency are actually going to play a role, and you're going to hear a difference between a kick that was high passed at 20 hertz and one that wasn't. And what is also a very big problem with high passing your low end is it just completely changes the phase of your track, of your kick sound. So the second you low pass it, the second you high cut it,
High
no,
pass it.
sorry, high pass it. I'm sorry, that still confuses me after 10 years. If you high pass it, it just changes the sound of your kick, unless you use a linear phase. But that also creates pre-ringing, and that sometimes you can sometimes ignore that, but sometimes it does make a difference. So I would just advise you from not taking out the low lows in your kick with a high pass. Of course, again, there's since you do hard clip, like if you were to high pass a kick and you have a hard clipper at the end, you can also try that. A lot of like I don't know if you know the techno subgenre called botchka. You know the botchka kicks like DK Oxy make, that Secta make.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's a very like Eastern techno sound. Also very like I don't know. I kind of associated with Russian producers like Secta and that kind of those kind of people. They actively um I'm not gonna speak on their name, but it's just something that I've learned is that they sometimes do high pass their kicks to create that certain sound. Like that's what I keep saying. There's no set rules to follow every time. Sometimes high passing your kick will sound good. Just try it out. It's just you just have to be careful. It will alter your sound if you don't do not use if you do not use EQ with linear phasing option, because if you don't, it will change the phase of your kick and thus ultimately change the whole sound of your kick.
Yeah, and depending,
Sometimes sometimes that can sound nice though. Happy accidents, you know?
yes, depending on the example, that change in the phase that happens due to the high pass in the kick drum can make the kick
I'm
sound better
we
or
we we
sometimes
can
worse.
we can just try it out. Let's just try it out and see. I'm just gonna put a for demonstration purposes, a that's also why we always automate our filters and stuff like that, because even if you have this filter on at 26 hertz, it's still gonna change your sound. It's still like it's still gonna do stuff. Even if you have an EQ that cuts at 10 hertz, it will still alter your sound, even though you can't hear those frequencies. And to be honest, if that's why I also say use a spectrum analyzer. If you don't really see much under like 30 hertz, then why would you cut it? Like that's what you got to ask yourself. Why would you cut a frequency you can't hear and you don't really see on a visual analyzer? Like for me or for us, there's no real logical reason to cut it. I'm not gonna lie, I did do that in the past, but yeah, you never stop learning. That's the nice thing about producing. You never stop learning. But let's just try it out. Let's just throw a as you can hear, I'm cutting frequencies, changing the Q of it, like the steepness and stuff of it. And as you could hear, it just creates a different sound. Even though you're basically just messing with the kick in the lower regions, it still messes with the whole sound of your kick, because it changes the phase of your kick. I don't know if you're gonna explain phasing, but I find to explain phasing, it's I don't know. I'm not the best at explaining sometimes. I don't know if you want to explain EQ phasing.
We can imagine it as playing certain frequencies of the kick drum by maybe a half of a millisecond or a millisecond a bit later than remaining frequencies.
Okay. Yeah.
That
Mm.
would be a big shortcut for the phasing.
Yeah,
But
it's a big rabbit hole to get into, especially like some people swear on linear phase, and then people are like, no, but it creates pre-ringing, and then people are like, yeah, but pre-ringing doesn't matter. And that's, I think, an important lesson also to take in music production is that there's no rule that will 100% always work. That's like the beauty of producing. You can find your own like truths that you produce by. And if it sounds good at the end of the day, who cares if you used a linear phase EQ or a natural phase EQ or a fruity parametric EQ? Like, if it sounds good, no one cares, you know?
but the thing about the plugins is something that one also have to like discover in time and maybe
Yes.
learn on its own. I remember that when I started out with music production, I was also downloading numerous different plugins. But it was at the moment when I, for example, started to use only massive synthesizer. That was the moment when I started to improve on sound design. Because earlier I was thinking that, oh, maybe if not massive, then silent one will make everything for me. If not silent one, then I don't know, some other synthesizer. Because back then there wasn't Serum released yet.
Yep.
The best synthesizer was the Massive by Native Instruments.
Oh yeah, massive. Those were good times. I barely use it anymore as well, but yeah. Like what I'm explaining here is also like years and years and years of experience. So it's just yeah, just try out new ways of sound designing. Just always try some not always, but try to push yourself. Try to not always use the same methods of creating a sound. Just try using different plugins and try using different distortion plugins. Try using I don't know, some different form of distortion on kicks and then comparing them. What we can also very recommend for making kind of more industrial-ish kicks is using a layer with is using this thing.
The most hideous distortion effect ever.
Yeah, you think so?
Just look at that.
But sometimes funny faces come in, and it's nice. Yeah, it has blood spatter on it, but yeah, a lot of like hardcore producers used to use this back in the day.
I think
Just-
Skrillex used on my side as well.
oh, it could be. Yeah, yeah. It's yeah. So it immediately creates results. It's not a sound that we wanted, but you know, if we wanted to do something else with it, like make a new kick with this, and then we could just throw an omnicide on there, and then just go with that. So there's unlimited possibilities, especially with kicks. Just don't be shy with processing them. I mean, if you want super clean kicks, then no. But yeah, that's not what mostly our intentions are, then that's why we process them. And it's also fun. It's just you get carried away sometimes, and it's just, it's we always like to keep the fun in producing. That's why sometimes we just process, and then we could even what we do a lot is we would have this sound. So let's take this sound for example, and you because in our songs we do have like a lot of kick switches. And what we mostly do is we just resample our kicks, um, which is also a recommendation because if you do a lot of processing, especially if you put any EQ like on linear phase, your uh your CPU will scream. If you like a certain sound, then resample it and then save it, because then you just have the kick that you made as a sample, and you save a lot of CPU. So what we do is we just resampling. Now let's use the where's our kick group? Here it is. No, sorry, my computer is quite old. So then we will just resample it. Okay, so then you have your sound, your resampled kick sound. Take any type of sampler. 1 minute. All right. Be sure to mute this one. Be sure to mute these ones as well because you don't want them. Oh. And then just take the pattern of the MIDI pattern of your kick. And then just put it onto the MIDI file you've just created. Let's turn this off. And another very cool feature is that what a lot of people oversee, especially in Ableton, is oh, nope, not this. Sorry. Is right clicking. And this is in German, I'm sorry, but this says normalize the loudness of the sample. And that just makes the sample as loud as possible without going over 0. And I find that it just works. I mean, you can also just increase the volume here, but I think this is just a neat little way of, yeah.
A much simpler way.
Exactly, a much simpler way. All right, so we have the full kick now. We could delete the old kick now and save the project new. So we don't have any of the CPU heavy processing going on, but I'm not gonna do that now. Yeah. Then what we can do basically is we have this kick sound, and then we can just have fun with it. Maybe just throw another trash two in there, even though we've already trash two'd and hard clipped it before. But why not change the sound of the kick again by, I don't know, some sort of wave shaping again. create different distortion type. Basically, you can just create different versions of your kick. And yeah, that's also a very nice way to create kick variations in your tracks. And also just to kind of let go of your old kick, because you know sometimes you always want to tweak stuff again, and sometimes you just got to commit. And processing your sound or freezing your sound to audio or bouncing your tracks to audio is a big step towards finishing your song. And that's why at the end we mostly bounce everything to audio. And it's just, yeah, it's just a nice way to alter your kick again. I mean, we could also again throw some more convolution reverb on there. You can put it on the whole group, or you can do it in multiple in parallel processing way. It doesn't really matter as long as the outcome sounds good. So we can try it here again. Yeah, I mean, you get the idea. It's basically just another way of getting creative with the kick you have and making something even better out of it. I mean, that's what I showed you right now is, I could have done it better, but I take a lot of time when I produce, and it's just a lot of tweaking and that kind of stuff. So basically would be just sitting here and just doing what I've showed you right now just for hours until I get the sound that I want.
Yeah, the original kick you have expanded in Ableton, which had
Exactly.
already a few different samples with
Exactly.
parallel processing. I can imagine that it indeed sounds like an 8 hours long job.
Yes, it is, but it's fun, I love producing and I love spending my time with it, and it's a fulfilling thing, and that's why, it's not a chore to do it. It's an amazing feeling.
And with that, I guess we could finish today's session. I guess the
Yay.
video is already going to be 1 hour long. So thank you
Oh,
very much
jeez.
for spending all that time and sharing the bits of the most interesting bits of your projects.